USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12 to join the Big Ten Conference. It is a seismic move in college football. It is supposed to happen in 2024. It's supposed to happen then. I would not be shocked if they play this fall and then are like, we're out now. They're moving on and they're moving up. And now the two major college football conferences are the SEC and the Big Ten. So let's say it out loud. The Power Five is now dead. You may not like that, but it's the big two, the SEC and the Big Ten, and then everybody else. Apparently, USC and UCLA approached the Big Ten saying, hey, we're planning to leave the Pac-12. Do you want us? It's kind of funny, too, because Pac-12 Commissioner George Klavekoff had a handshake agreement with the other conferences saying, like, hey, you're not going to poach our guys, right? Pac-12 Commissioner George Klavekoff might be Klavekoff, however you say his name. I'm going to say Klavekoff. He might be remembered as the guy who oversaw the dismantling of the entire Pac-12 conference. Years and years of tradition. I grew up watching USC dominate, and Matt Leinart winning national titles. I was with my dad on the couch watching that. That Pac-10, the Pac-12, it's probably going to be gone in a couple years. It wouldn't surprise me. He's been commissioner for 1 year. It's gone pretty badly. And apparently he was away on vacation in Montana when this was announced that, hey, we're leaving the Pac-12, and he was kind of caught off guard. I don't blame USC or UCLA for leaving. I mean, there's going to be more money, more resources, more exposure. It's better for recruiting. Like, you can't blame them for leaving the Pac-12. I used to work for Pac-12 Network, and they financially were not very responsible and aren't generating as much money as other conferences and other opportunities will provide. Here's what I find interesting most of all in this stuff with the I guess, by the way, now apparently colleges can enter the transfer portal. You hear about players, oh, this guy's leaving for there. Well, we've seen Texas, Oklahoma, USC, UCLA, they're all moving, and it's a size of moves are going on. Now, what's interesting in all of this, though, is why UCLA? Why isn't it USC and Oregon going to the Big Ten, or USC and Washington, or Utah? Like, why? If you think of, like, the most prominent, biggest and best schools in the Pac-12, UCLA, California, Los Angeles, they're not the number 2 school in your head that you think of as the second best big brand in the Pac-12. Here's why I think it's happening. By having both schools in LA, USC and UCLA, the Big Ten will dominate Southern California recruiting like no other. There's 3 big regions in the recruiting world. Like, the 3 biggest, at least, are the South, Florida in particular, Southern California, and the Midwest. Those are now there's other areas, a lot of guys out east and yada yada, but right now the Big Ten is going to dominate and own 2 of the 3 major recruiting hotbeds. Everyone talks about it's Texas, Florida, California, and then the South, like the biggest places to recruit. Well, the Big Ten is going to dominate the Midwest and Southern California, leaving the South and Florida and all the South everywhere to the SEC. That is why I think they're like, let's take UCLA, because of the strategic importance and value they bring by going there. By the way, the Big Ten is now a nationwide brand. They've got schools in Maryland, in New Jersey, in LA. It's interesting to me. I love that. One second, I'm going to shift my camera. My camera's like, I've realized this now. Let's do this. There we go. I think I'm more centered now. So what's next for the rest of college football, basically? Because you got a couple big schools that are not in the Big Ten or the SEC. You've got Clemson, Miami, Oregon, Utah, Washington, Notre Dame. Notre Dame doesn't really want to join a conference. That's been their thing for years. And it makes me want to read a question from Patreon. You go to patreon.com/Zach Schaumler if you want to submit questions to Strong Opinion Sports. Balin writes in and says, hey, Zach, it's June 30th, and this literally just happened, and I assume we're going to cover it, but USC and UCLA are leaving the Pac-12 for the Big Ten, seemingly out of nowhere. At least that's what it looks like as of right now, as this is kind of developing. As an Oregon fan, this kind of worries me, actually, because for the next few years, it completely destabilizes the conference and basically leaves just Washington and Oregon as the remaining powerhouse school left in the Pac-12. Schools, he means, I'm sure. While this may be good for records, having only 10 teams, and not very good ones at that in my eyes, removes any credibility the Pac-12 may have been clinging to. So here's your primer if you want to use it. Do you think the Pac-12 dissolves and we get 3 to 4 mega conferences over the next 5 to 7 years, or does the Pac-12 steal schools like Boise State, Montana, or Fresno from the Mountain West? Boise State and Fresno have proven to be solid teams nearly every year that can usually run with the mid-tier Pac-whatever school teams, and Montana usually has some good surprises each year and could be a fun addition. Personally, I like the idea of adding Boise and Fresno, but I think 4 regional mega conferences, much like the NFL's conference divisions, would be better for football. There's a lot in that question, Balin. Thank you for writing. He's a Ducks fan. I think he lives in Eugene. Boise State, Fresno State, I've heard maybe San Diego State. They cannot replace USC or UCLA. I am sorry. That's just not that's not a lateral move. It's not equivalent at all. It's a big step down for the Pac-12. And what's interesting, you can't replace USC or UCLA with those schools. I am fascinated by Oregon, Clemson, Miami. I think Utah would leave in a heartbeat. Clemson in particular, they're the best in the ACC by a lot. I think Miami's a big brand that could pop off soon if Mario Cristobal does well. They all want more money, I guarantee. They are not happy. They see Oklahoma, Texas, USC, UCLA all leaving for better conferences and go, I'm next. It's my turn. There's enough teams for basically 3 big conferences in college football. You say 4 to 5 mega conferences. I say, well, really? Is Wake Forest and Oregon State, Washington State, these like low-level tier teams that are bad to okay in other, conferences in college football, you can't put them all together and make a big one. Here's what you can do. There's a handful of other teams that are not either in the SEC or the Big Ten. Again, Utah, Clemson, Oregon, Miami, maybe Washington, Notre Dame, but they're not going to join a conference. I think if you can get those schools together and then maybe a couple schools with crazy tradition that aren't very good, but that have a gigantic, ravenous fan base, you could put together a third interesting conference. Here's a really interesting question, though, I think we need to ask is, how good is it really to be the dominating king of the Pac-12 or the ACC? If Oregon destroys the Pac-12 every year and wins every game, or if Clemson or Miami dominates the ACC, on one hand, that's good because you get an easy path to the college football playoff. But is that kind of bad logic? Because will the college football playoff committee respect that kind of schedule? Or could we just see 4 teams from 2 from the Big Ten, 2 from the SEC go in, and maybe there's a 4th team that's really good from, but it's very possible that the college football playoff committee goes, we don't really respect your schedule anymore. You're playing Washington State, Oregon State, Wake Forest. Who cares? So how much credibility is it going to be to win the Pac-12 or the ACC moving forward? Or the Big 12 is out there, but I don't even care about the Big 12 because they lost their big draw already. Here's a thing that I say cautiously, and I feel kind of bad that this is true, but it is true. Personally, I love the SEC, and I love the Big Ten. I grew up in Oregon. I grew up in Pac-12 country. I'm supposed to be a Pac-12 fan. My whole family is. People give me crap for not being a bigger Oregon supporter. I think the Pac-12 kind of has some undeserved arrogance, in my opinion, frankly. I feel bad for Washington State, Oregon State, Arizona, these bottom Pac-12 schools that are kind of screwed now after this move. But honestly, as just a fan of college football who wants good for the sport and wants entertaining football, I'm not that disappointed to see, hey, you're going to get USC playing Ohio State and Michigan? That sounds incredible. Hey, Oklahoma, Texas are going to play Alabama and, Mississippi and Georgia. And I just think all of that sounds fun. And I think that the two most interesting conferences in college football getting even more interesting. As someone who's objective and tries to be fair, who just wants good games and exciting football, I think it gives us more of that. The Pac-12 has always been interesting in a vacuum, but nationally they have never been able to compete with the top-level talent or programs or conferences. And so I'm not saying good riddance, but I'm not that disappointed, actually. It's just shocking and big news for sure, but it's not actually... I wish I could tell you I was very disappointed, but I'm actually not.